Azir, the Emperor of Shurima, has been released, and now, players can experience the thrills of leading a nation. Cringe as your underlings ignore crimes being committed right in front of them. Sit through hours of boring council meetings about irrigation and crop management. And facepalm as your citizens complain on Rune Twitter, blaming you for everything from burnt toast to lost keys. Are you ready to lead a nation to glory?
The next president to lead the way? Well, it just might be yourself one day. Then the press will distort everything you say. So jump in your plane and fly away.
Let's get started. There's a good chunk of information that wasn't covered in the Champion Spotlight, hence why I'm making this guide. First and foremost, his spell descriptions leave something to be desired. Some of the tooltip information is just blatantly wrong. We'll begin with his passive, the Sun Disk ability. Basically, destroyed friendly turrets and enemy turrets that aren't inhibitor or nexus turrets can have friendly turrets built on them for 1 minute. The spell's tooltip is actually inaccurate. It says you can raise a tower once every 3 minutes. That's not true. There's a 3-minute cooldown on the spell, however, the cooldown isn't triggered until after the tower that you have raised is destroyed, which means that it's impossible to cast it once every 3 minutes. And when I say impossible, I mean actually impossible because the cooldown can't be reduced. Seriously, I had 35% cooldown reduction and it's still a 3-minute cooldown and only starts after the tower dies. Viable turret locations show up as blue dots on the minimap. To build one, you move up to it and right-click, similar to how you'd capture a relic in Ascension. If you don't know what that is, then go watch my Ascension guide, link in the description box down below. It takes a few seconds for the turret to build, and once that's done, it performs most of the normal turret functions. It detects stealth in a wide radius, it does more damage with each shot, and is capable of granting you gold, kills, and assists even if you didn't otherwise participate in a fight. However, as soon as it's created, it starts losing health over time and eventually dies. It'll die faster if it's attacked. It'll lose some stats if you move too far away from it, but it'll still remain combat effective for the time it'll be up, and considering the fairly rapid loss of health, it probably wasn't going to be helped much by you hanging around anyway, except in special circumstances. You can teleport to it and get the cooldown reduction bonus for teleporting to a turret. However, when using it defensively on, say, a Nexus turret, it will not prevent the Nexus from being targeted like a normal turret would. There's another passive, but we'll get to that later. As for your active spells, well, there's some unclarified info there too. Most of what's important is how your spells interact with one another. Your first skill will always be W, Arise, taking it as compulsory. W creates a Sand Soldier at the target location for 9 seconds, and you can hold 2 charges. This is the same both at rank 1 and 5, as is the mana cost of 40. In fact, all of Azir's spells have flat mana costs that are the same at all ranks. Auto-attacking something when a Sand Soldier is in range of the target will make Azir hold in place and give an attack command to the Sand Soldier, and Azir himself won't actually attack the target, even if both him and the Sand Soldier are within melee range. The Sand Soldiers don't attack anything around them unless ordered to do so. Their attack range is also fairly short, but attacks done hit in a line, so you can potentially hit a minion to hit a target behind it that would otherwise be out of range. Sand Soldiers do magic damage when they attack, and their attacks scale with ability power. You can also cast W on an enemy turret to inflict magic damage to it instead of spawning a Sand Soldier. However, this does not work on inhibitors, and the turret's resistance will lower the damage. Still, Sand Soldiers recharge so rapidly that if you're trying to take a turret, you'll use it for this purpose fairly often. However, you should be made aware that casting W on a turret from outside of Azir's auto-attack range will simply create another Sand Soldier. If you want to use the spell to damage a turret, you must be within auto-attack range. Leveling up W will lower the recharge timer on refilling Sand Soldier spawns, and will give them some more damage to their attacks, as well as increase the damage done to the turrets by the spell. Your Q is Conquering Sands, and is basically a move command for the soldiers, costing 70 mana regardless of how many soldiers the order is issued to, and dealing damage to anything impacted. While you can cast the move order just about anywhere, the Sand Soldiers will only reliably move to a location in a radius around you, so the Sand Soldiers don't actually have a set range in the sense that, say, a Rumble Ultimate would. If you're standing behind them and try to send them forward, and forward is further away from you, they might travel only a short distance, but if they're behind you and you're sending them in front of you, they'll be able to travel much further. There is also a stacking slow of 25%, but this remains the same at all levels. Leveling up Q will reduce the spell's cooldown and increase the damage done by the move order. Your E is Shifting Sands and is a dash/knock-up/shield. It will take you to a Sand Soldier in a quick dash. Colliding with an enemy champion will stop your dash, grant you a shield for 4 seconds, and very briefly knock the enemy in the air. You can see the path of this dash as you are connected via a sand stream to all of your soldiers, and will be able to tell when an enemy will be impacted or not, at least if you haven't moved too far away. The spell costs 60 mana. The shield is some base value plus 15% of your bonus health. Leveling up Shifting Sands will reduce the spell's cooldown, increase the damage of the collision, and increase the base value of the shield, but not the health percentage bonus. It also won't increase the duration of the knockup. Now let's talk about combining these 3 spells. The most noteworthy use will be combining W and E as a a short cooldown relocation ability. You can drop sand soldiers over just about every wall in the game if you target far enough away and immediately dash to them. Here's a quick rundown on how it works. The game will attempt to drop the sand soldier on open terrain close to your cursor, meaning if your cursor is close to your character, it may appear right in front of you, and if your cursor is on the other side of a large wall, it'll appear on the other side of the wall, farther away than a flash would otherwise take you. You should avoid hovering your cursor in the middle of terrain, as you can accidentally glitch the sand soldier into a wall, and it's not funny after it's happened several times. The sand soldiers also grant vision in a radius around them and can be used as ghetto wards to check bushes and what's on the other side of walls. I've yet to find a wall I couldn't drop a sand soldier over by targeting terrain on the other side. If you have multiple sand soldiers up, pressing the dash key will not automatically dash you to one. Your cursor will need to be relatively close to one for it to function, and it'll target whichever the game thinks is closest to your cursor, as is being demonstrated on screen. Despite sand soldiers being untargetable, they die rapidly when they move into turret range. Your Q's range is decent for harassment, and you can often throw sand soldiers under the turret to harass an enemy without being shot at by the tower, if you're careful. However, you should remember that sand soldiers don't attack unless given an auto-attack command, and when issuing an attack order, Azir will hold still and perform a command action. But if the sand soldier is outside of attack range, the game will think you mean to make Azir do an auto-attack, and will start walking up to the enemy to do so. Meaning, if you're not careful when trying to harass an enemy, this can easily make you walk into a turret and eat a few shots, so be mindful of that. On that note, sand soldier aggro, due to being untargetable, translates to your aggro, so ordering them to harass while you're standing in turret range will often be a bad idea. Also, it means people can't use teleport on them. You can use your Q to reposition sand soldiers while chasing an enemy or fleeing, and since you can throw them further ahead of you than you could by spawning one in front of you with your W, this can be used to more rapidly chase down an opponent or escape from one when used in combination with your dash. However, it should also be noted that sand soldiers will auto-despawn if you move too far away. The distance for that is currently being demonstrated on screen. Now onto the second passive and ultimate. The second passive is that he gains attack speed based off of his cooldown reduction. Remember, Azir is an ability power champion, so you shouldn't be planning on going AD with him. The attack speed bonus connects to the speed which he casts his attack command to the sand soldiers, whom in turn will dish out more magic damage by attacking faster. That's why he has an attack speed passive, and that's what it should generally be used for. Now onto his ultimate. His ultimate is a knockback with some damage that creates a wall for enemies and a minor speed increase for teammates, and his wall will block most dash abilities, however not flash-like ones. This can make him a solid counterpick to some dash-heavy champions that need mobility in teamfights. The ultimate creates a line of soldiers just behind him, which then move forward to the target location, knocking back anything hit. This can be used to help create ganks as well as to escape from them, and is a very powerful separation ability for teamfights to arrange scenarios where enemies are forcefully pulled out of position rather than simply caught out, as well as saving a teammate that was caught out, and the spell is wide enough that it can fully block off most jungle paths. Azir is a strong champion with a very powerful kit of utility tools, especially for tactical decisions and objective control, such as dashing over a wall and knocking someone away to prevent the enemy Lee Sin from stealing Baron, to walling off jungle chokes, to dashing into a team and knocking several people away to forcefully catch someone. He has a fast recharging spell for pushing turrets, and the ability to create a turret, albeit temporarily, gives him a powerful kit for the purpose of securing important objectives and winning games, and very useful early game push abilities. However, he is not without weaknesses to exploit. His kit is too complex for some people to understand or use correctly, and can be easily outplayed if the Azir player fails at controlling his sand soldiers even slightly. Since they have limited attack range, a minor relocation should be enough to avoid most of his harassment, unless he expends much of his mana pool chasing you around, and champions with ranged last-hitting abilities should have an easier time against him than those who need to melee to last hit. For auto attacks, he will usually hold still in order to command his sand soldiers to attack you, and this can also be exploited, as can the ease at which an Azir player can unintentionally dive you when trying to harass, if you bait him to try to harass with a sand soldier and move just out of range enough for him to command himself forward, sometimes into a turret or, say, a Caitlyn trap. His turrets also grant a substantial bounty when destroyed. Now that he's out, many Azir players will likely be compelled to spam them wherever they can, and this is essentially a bounty waiting to be collected. It's not as valuable as a dragon kill or normal turret, but it's still a hefty amount of cash if the Azir player didn't think before dropping it down, and since it automatically loses health over time, moving in to kill it shouldn't be all that challenging. Sniping a couple of them can easily grab a financial lead for you. Proper use of the turret should be to save it as if it were an ultimate for a time where it'd be really useful to have a friendly turret somewhere. Most of the time it won't be beneficial to simply throw it up randomly. If you see Azir relocate a sand soldier to you, you can move out of the path between him and the soldier to dodge his stun and block his ability to shield himself. If an Azir is fleeing from you and throws his soldiers ahead ahead of him. If you're moving faster than him, you can also position yourself directly in front of him to block his dash. As for item builds and masteries, for those I would point you in the direction of guides on LoLKing or a similar website. A link to the Azir guide list on LoLKing has been posted in the description box for your perusal. Item builds and the like tend to change more than a champion's kit, and a written guide can be kept up to date much more than a YouTube video can. As such, I would rather refer you to up-to-date guides for those, rather than include it in a video where it'll run the risk of misleading someone if this video is watched a few months down the line. This video's purpose was to tell you how to play Azir and understand him. To that end, the aforementioned information should be enough to give you a firm grasp on how to actually play Azir properly and not be terrible, as well as have information on how to fight him. To give a brief overview for the time being, since he'll need to dash to an enemy to stun and be fairly close to initiate his ultimate, and gains a shield off of bonus health, I'd probably recommend building him at least somewhat tanky due to the combat situations you're likely to encounter, at least when in solo queue with frontline teammates that may not reliably peel for you. Since your Sand Soldiers can last hit and CS for you, that might make runes with flat AP a bit more viable for early sustain, harass, and trades, and magic penetration will likely remain a must for Azir. As for skill ups, for the moment I'd probably put a point in W, Q, and E for your first 3 levels, then focus on leveling Q first, barring of course points for your ultimate, to help gain some harass and burst. Then put points into W or E as they become more important later, prioritizing them depending on the situation and if it'd be more advantageous to focus on W or E, as I can see situations where either would be more helpful. But again, I'd recommend checking an up-to-date written guide for item build, masteries, rune page, skill order, and viable summoners, especially if you're watching this a protracted time after release. As for where to play him, well, I think that's also something up for debate and will change as time goes on. He's seemingly intended as a mid laner, but I don't think that makes him less viable in other positions. I tried him as a support, and his Sand Soldier attacks all generated bonus gold from that support harass item that I can't remember the name of, but that's simply an anecdote, and again, I'd encourage you to check an up-to-date guide if you intend on taking him into ranked. In summary, Azir is basically a high-utility champion who can make major plays but also make gigantic and costly mistakes, especially for those unfamiliar with how exactly his mechanics work. He's a very powerful champion but also hazardous to the guy playing him at the slightest accident, and I like that, so I give Azir a solid recommendation. If you have any questions about the champion, feel free to ask in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. Now, go forth to glorious victory. I'll see you next time, YouTube.